let's get this show on the road, folks. Can everybody hear me okay? Looks like the microphones are working now. I had a little trouble, as usual, getting set up. You can tell tonight we're at Casa Otto as opposed to the native plant garden. Had a few things going on today that precluded my 8-minute commute over to Potawatomi this evening. But did give me a couple extra minutes to get set up here and to pour a somewhat frosty beverage to enjoy as we spend some time together this evening. Let's get this show on the road. I wanted to start before we lose our light, and I did bring a lamp out this evening because that funky LED light I had, one, it's funky, gives me kind of a weird bluish glow, and second of all, it's over at my office, so I just brought a house lamp out here onto the deck. The other thing, let's see, where did I put? Here they are. You can see we've still got European praying mantis. He or she may or may not be joining us a little bit later on. Also got the great beetle experiment here that we're going to talk about perhaps later on. We'll see if they wake up or not. They're kind of late risers. They don't tend to get active. Those are the stag beetles. They don't tend to get active until much after dark. Speaking of stag beetles, the population in there is down by one. Here's a male that gave up on chasing the other males. Interestingly enough, it's one of the male stag beetles with slightly smaller mandibles. The guy with the really big mandibles is still hanging out in there. But I don't know if he clobbered his rival and that brought about this guy's demise, or if it was just the end of his time here on our great planet. But I also wanted to show you this beetle, which has nothing to do with the stag beetle experiment. This was on my deck the other night, and unfortunately it was already dead. Miss Laura, you might recognize this because I think you had some of these come to visit. It's a beautiful orangish brown color, and there are 6 spots on the wing covers here. This is a grapevine beetle, and my dear neighbors know I've got grapevine growing wildly out of control all over the fences here. I did try and raise these. I did raise some of these from grubs that were found in a mulch pile a few years ago. Took about a year to form, to come out in their adult form. They formed, going from white grubs that were, about, I don't know, what is it, about 1.5 inches or so. They weren't as large as stag beetle grubs, but they were good sized. They make these really cool earthen cocoons. They form mud balls, and that's what they pupate inside of. So that was a neat discovery about the life cycle of some of our other, maybe less common or less well recognized beetles as compared to our stag beetles. The praying mantis has made a lot of impact on my life these last couple of weeks. There's something about me, maybe it's my Scandinavian, my frugal Scandinavian roots. I refuse to go and buy crickets for something if I can find bugs on my own. And what I've learned since getting the praying mantis, let's get him out here since he's right next to me here. You see him there on the inside of the lid? He's going to come out and say hi. Just turned his head to say hi to everybody. Some of the stories I want to share with you this evening have to do with trying to find insect prey for this little European mantis. It's not as easy as I thought. If I had to sustain myself by catching crickets and grasshoppers, I wouldn't be here. It's been quite an adventure, and what I thought was a great solution. I don't know if the mantis has agreed with me. I found some ragweed that was covered with aphids. some sort of aphid species that seems to really like ragweed. They're small little dark insects that are very juicy. I don't know if you can see just that little tiny spot on my finger. Just the farther away I go, the more clear the image is. But tiny little aphids, I thought this little guy would be all over them. And the reception has been kind of mediocre. Every time I drop a fly in, it's all over it. The aphids, kind of can take or leave them. I checked, there's no toxins to speak of in the ragweed, so it's not that. But anyway, it still seems like it's, I keep saying his or her abdomen is plump, so he is eating enough, but I'll give you another update as time goes on with our mantis. If I can get him off my hand here. Now, I did have a couple of bits of correspondence that I wanted to share with you. One came in, and so you know how I tend to rant a little bit from time to time about our use of pesticides, humans' use of pesticides, in, I think, many unnecessary ways. Well, this one, I can't really fault the reader who wrote in. Though I'm going to point a big finger at her pest control service. Let's take a look. I'm going to see if I can share the email that she wrote a little earlier in the week, actually last weekend. Okay, I think we can all see that. It says, "Hi Pam, I read your article regarding the praying mantis, and I was wondering if you could identify some insects that have been swarming my house the past month. I've had an exterminator, one of my least favorite words, come out twice to spray, but it only helps for a short time. They, meaning the exterminator, don't know what they are, although the first time they thought that they were sand fleas, and the second time he thought maybe they were spider mites. Now, I don't know what kind of an exterminator this is, but sand fleas and spider mites, huge differences in those two. They're not even remotely related organisms, and habitat would have a lot to do with where you're finding those things. So anyway, clearly this outfit that's running around spraying chemicals isn't really good at identifying what they're spraying at. Her description goes on to say they are small and they hang on the screens and in the bushes and in the grass. We do have a pond in our backyard, but we've lived here 10 years and have never had this problem. I took a picture and I'm attaching it here for you. I'd be so grateful if you could identify this insect." All right, you ready? I'll give you a hint. It's not a sand flea and it's not a spider mite. It's these guys here. These are chironomid midges. They look a little bit, they're about the size of a mosquito. These are males, and you can tell they're males by the fluffy antennae that are blurry here as I try to magnify the picture. Maybe if I make it smaller, you can see a little bit, the detail a little bit better. But big feathery antennae in front of the head. These things, they live in the water. They generally are found, well, they can live in very well oxygenated water, but they can also survive in low oxygenated water. And I kind of wonder if maybe that's what's going on in the pond, but these are what develop from little bloodworms that we find in the substrate, usually in silt in aquatic environments. Harmless to people and extremely valuable to all sorts of critters, from developing frogs and toads on up to flycatchers, groups of birds that catch insects on the wing. This is a really, really important part of our local ecology. And again, I don't fault the reader. She sees something, and maybe I fault her a little bit because, before you call somebody and ask them to kill it, maybe you should find out what it is that you're trying to get rid of. So anyway, I am going to craft a measured and polite response to her. and just let her know what she's dealing with. But just yet another example of how we are polluting and killing parts of our ecosystem without reason. Okay, that rant's over. I've got another letter. Now tell me, did this just switch over? I'm never quite sure if I have to switch shares. I think everybody can see this. Greg, this is from you, and I have been just grinning ear to ear ever since I read this. Greg and Kelly have been loyal, good-natured fans ever since the beginning. In fact, it's passed along to Greg's parents and Greg's aunt. Lots of members of that clan that tune in on Tuesday night. And Greg and Kelly, if you don't mind, I'm just going to go ahead and share. It was so well written, and it identifies what is indeed a big problem in our natural areas, not just here in Illinois, but wherever this plant has been introduced.
Hey Pam, we're still seeing the midge.
Oh, so I do have to. Okay, thanks, Greg. Let me stop that share, and let me start. And so why would that make a difference? All right. So now can you see? Hi Pam, I wrote a little thing.
Yep.
All right. And I've got a little thing crawling up my arm. Let me see if I can get the praying mantis to go back in his cage. All right. Put the lid on. All right. So Greg wrote a little thing about their recent adventure and thought I was absolutely interested, and I thought that you all might be interested. Kelly and I went for a bike ride along the Cal-Sag Canal in the Forest Preserve District of Cook County on Saturday, and for something with a name as unpleasant sounding as Cal-Sag Canal, it was surprisingly, even remarkably beautiful. The bike path was well paved and maintained and meandered through woods and savanna areas and big open restored prairies. It actually reminded us a lot of the Fox River Trail, but not as heavily trafficked, and it was absolutely worth the drive. Anyway, back to those restored prairies. Unfortunately, many of them were just chock-a-block packed full of this weird, extremely tall, multi-headed, spiky-looking plant. Cue the dramatic music. Dun, dun, dun. Here's it from a slight distance, and then here it is up close. There are some areas where there would be a mile or so of prairie on either side of the path, and then suddenly the blue stem and the black-eyed Susans and the coneflowers and the Queen Anne's lace would give way to entire fields of this enormous and dangerous-looking plant. This is like those Japanese horror films, except instead of praying mantis, it's a deadly, extremely dangerous-looking plant. The flower stems and even the leaves are covered in sharp, pointy shards, which I love that description. Where it was established, it made the entire area appear entirely impassable. It was as if barbed wire had come to life and had become a plant. Honestly, considering how sharp it looked and how much of it there was, it was kind of scary. I googled the photo and it came back as teasel, native to Asia and Europe. It was introduced here for an economic purpose, providing a handy industrial age era tease to help fluff wool into felt. You can just picture that. Those of you maybe who you've seen wool being carded, you know how they use those sharp those cards to orient the strands of the wool. This too was used to make that wool into felt. Its flowers were also dried and added to bouquets, which I know I can remember my mom picking them when we'd go down to visit her family down on the farm downstate. She wouldn't just pick it, but she would bring it home and then spray it with gold spray paint and add it to fall arrangements in the house. These manufacturing and aesthetic reasons are long gone now, having been replaced by machines and I guess less aggressive looking flowers. But the teasel remains and has grown to be quite a nuisance. So much so that the Department of Agriculture in Minnesota, where it's apparently not gained a foothold yet, has a kill on-site order against the plant. I'm honestly not surprised for the state of Minnesota's dramatic response. When we got back from our ride, driving around yesterday, now that I know what to look for, I saw it everywhere. It's next to roadsides, against fence rows, in ditches, near wetlands of varying quality, near subdivisions, and even near our own house along the abandoned railroad right-of-way that runs through St. Charles. Its imposing stands can be hundreds of feet long. You know, Greg, your words were running through my head today. I was driving over to Wheaton, and local people, if you go down, if you're heading on Route 38, east of Geneva, that stretch where the Amazon warehouse is and where they're doing all that building, so very much disturbed earth. It's almost solid teasel all along there on the south side of the road. Which is kind of a shame because that's dangerously close to the West Chicago Prairie, which is a mighty fine chunk of space owned by and operated by maintained by the DuPage Forest Preserve District. So I love this. Cutleaf teasel. Cutleaf teasel everywhere. It seems like once it's established, it's pretty adept at staying put and spreading out, creating monoculture and crowding out native species. Flower head creates hundreds of tiny seeds which are caught easily by the wind. Mowing is particularly ineffective at controlling the plant, which tends to spread the prolific seeds more widely, as is prescribed burning, which opens up even more area for the teasel to colonize. The IDNR recommends applying glyphosate, which we all know as Roundup, to areas where it is set up shop. I think we can all agree that rounding up a native prairie to control teasel, especially considering how widespread it appears to be, seems cost prohibitive and widely environmentally unsustainable. But it doesn't seem like there are many better options. I would hate to see our own forest preserves and parks be taken over by teasel, but considering how widespread it appears to be, it seems like it's practically inevitable. I know we want to avoid pejorative adjectives like bad, invasive, and destructive. Thanks for pointing that out too, Greg. When describing introduced species, which are just doing what nature has selected them to do, but our bike ride along Calsag gave us a bit of a look directly into the maw of what happens when one particular introduced species thrives in its new environment. If teasel isn't bad, invasive, or destructive per se, it is at least very, very spiky. Yeah, well, and Greg, to add to your most eloquently written essay, I was out, as we'll see in the photos for tonight, I was at several different St. Charles parks this week, and teasel is creeping in, especially in a park called Riverside Bowie, which is right at the border with Geneva on Route 25. It's an interesting, it's a park that now plays a role in stormwater management over there on the east side, but it's been planted in natives, and there's still a lot of natives hanging on there, but the teasel is, especially by the Fox River Trail near the river. I was one struck by the amount of teasel, and two by its draw. The pollinators love it. They were all covered with bumbles, and honeybees too were drawn to it. But yes, teasel, it's here. We're going to have to deal with it, and this is where Kim, I don't know if you've joined us for the evening, but Kim Haig, our trusted expert in dealing with all things invasive, steward at Johnson's Mound. What do you have to say about teasel?
Well, everything that Greg said was just absolutely right on. That's for sure. It's really well, the fact that it has 1 million seeds and people use it in arrangements, and so it spreads. And as Greg said, you want to get away from terms like invasive, but what it is, it prevents our native plants from growing because it just spreads out so much. There was 3 other Wild Ones members, and I actually went and talked to them at the King County Department of Transportation because we 4 were particularly upset by how much it has spread in King County, and we actually offered to see if we could go out at this time of the year is the time to cut it, to go out and cut it. But they are rightly, understandably worried about people actually going on in the roadways, the sides of the roads, and actually being killed. So, and which, I mean, they actually had someone not doing teasel, but from the transportation department actually being killed in a right of way area. So I understand that. And they and they know that when they cut teasel, or earlier at the Chervil, when they cut it, they know, I mean, the county's big enough, by the time they get to the end, they're just doing nothing but spreading seeds. So I did, in my research, talk to a woman named Erin Holmes, who is the roadside manager for the Department of Transportation of Illinois. And she said that the best way to do it, excuse me, to get rid of it, is to cut it and herbicide it. Probably have to do it more than once, and then to plant sedges. There's certain sedges called warrior sedges that are really strong and hardy and will fight other things like that. But
was that warrior sedges? Like
well, there's a group of sedges called warrior, WARRIOR sedges. Some that, because they're really there are some that you can plant to fight off reed, canary grass, and then there's these that will fight off the teasel. But it's an incredibly time-intensive project to do that. I also subsequently, I've talked to Ben Habither, who's the head of natural resources for the Forest Preserve, and they've actually been in conversation with the King County Department of Transportation to see if there's a possibility of the Forest Preserve heading up some of those projects as well. In fact, they even have a grant. There's a Elkhurst Forest Preserve in the south part of the county. They even have got a grant for next year, that because the teasel there is overwhelming, and to actually fight the teasel there. So but in the meantime, it just keeps spreading and spreading. So it's and the other thing, if you see it coming up earlier in the spring, and Mary Alice Masonic has been on this for years, if you cut it early, it just sprouts even more. It'll, instead of having one shoot go up, it'll have 2 or 3. So Mary Alice always sets her calendar for this time of the year to go out and try and cut the seeds heads off before they spread. She was doing that up a lot at Burnage Forest Preserve up in Elgin. So it's quite a fight, and I think, as he said, it's spreading. When I went up to Wisconsin, I didn't see as much there along the roads, but I suppose that's just a matter of time until it gets there too.
I think, yeah, the amount of development that we're undergoing here in Kane County, the amount of earth that's being turned over or scraped away, piled up, and then the seeds that are reaching that soil. This is a plant that thrives in disturbed areas, and we've got a lot of them. And it's just great. The other thing I was struck by in what you wrote was that this is true of so many things, that you know, we go about our daily lives and you just sort of accept your surroundings, but then when you become aware of a piece of it that it maybe doesn't fit or doesn't belong, and you learn about it, and suddenly your eyes are open, and you see it. My goodness, it's everywhere. It works both ways though, too. I will say, you know, during morel season, it takes forever for me to find the first morel mushroom because my eye has to get trained to it. But once I find it, then I start. Well, I can't say I'm finding them all over. I'm not that lucky, but it makes it easier to see once your eye is trained or your brain is trained to spot that shape. But yeah, the teasel thing. Kim, are you? Is it in Johnson's Mound at all? Have you had to fight it there?
No, we don't have. Well, we do have the back 70, the former farm field, which is eventually going to be prairie, and I think it's because it's in between cornfields and the MA Center and Richardson property. It hasn't gotten in there yet, so I'm grateful for that. So, and I haven't seen it along Hughes Road, so it's probably the only place I haven't seen it.
Don't even pitch.
So if it were, we'd be out there getting rid of it. So, but it's certainly at other forest preserves. I know Mary Alice said, you know, but she actually has kept it pretty much in check. And at Burnage because she's been after it for like 20 years. So
Okay.
that's what it needs. And the thing of it is, Kane County, whether it's the Forest Preserve or the Department of Transportation, they just do not have the personnel to go out there and every roadside and cut it in herbicide, much less cut herbicide and then plant sedges. So
now, isn't it, and Greg and Kelly, I know you guys have adopted a highway, haven't you, or adopted a roadway and done cleanups? There's a part of me that's wondering, could this be, a part of a roadside cleanup?
So we adopted Kirk Road south of Division Street on the east side of Kirk in Geneva, and so about half of that is a cornfield. It butts up against a cornfield, and then the other half of it is just the unincorporated houses there that are in between, like Geneva Road and Roosevelt Road. Okay. And I don't remember seeing it, but I would have expected it to not really be there either. It's not probably not rural enough, or it hasn't been, the soil hasn't been broken up there. But I don't remember seeing it. But on the other hand, now I feel like you hit it right on the head. Like now that I have seen it, I'm seeing it everywhere.
Your nightmares.
Yeah, and it's kind of this nightmarish thing where it just looks like it's everywhere.
Right.
And so I wouldn't be surprised if it is there, frankly, because there's no reason for it not to be.
It's everywhere. Well, I'm wondering, whatever the protocol, or whatever instruction and support you receive from the highway department, or is it the highway department, or
if I remember, my dad might be able to weigh in, but I think that it's the
transportation,
like department, the KDOT, and all we're supposed to do is pick up trash, and it's only in the right of way. It's like the 8 feet or whatever that are up against Kirk Road. Now, IDOT might have a different set of rules if for the state highways, but for Kirk Road, all we're supposed to do is pick up trash.
Well, and I actually talked to this person, Erin Holmes, at the IDOT, and she said, and I said, couldn't we just have it expanded from the, adopt a highway program to do that? And as I said, she said it would be nice to do that. And KDOT said they were really worried about people, if it's 8 feet, about getting too close to the road. So because as Greg said, it's just for garbage now, and they didn't want to include, even not using herbicide maybe, but even not even getting over there and cutting things, because they just were worried about the liability of it. So adopt a highway does not include getting rid of plants.
What about burning it? Have you guys tried to burn it?
Well, I think Greg read that it made it worse.
Yeah, burning. Let's see, where it's not everywhere.
I read most of what I read said that burning it wasn't particularly effective, because all it does is it opens up areas to further colonization. But on the other hand, where I didn't see it yesterday when I was driving around was at Leroy Oaks, and I know that Leroy Oaks was burned at some point during the pandemic, so it was within the past 18 months or so, and I wonder if that helped. So no idea really, and maybe it's there and I just didn't see it when I was on Dean Street driving around. But the limited amount of research that I did said that indicated that burning was not a particularly, but that absolutely mowing it was a terrible idea if you're trying to not spread it.
Well, I was going to say there is a store at Leroy Oaks too, so if there was, I know that he would have gotten rid of as much as could too. Well, so
I remember this was a few years ago. I went with a couple of guys from code enforcement at the city of St. Charles to go look at a subdivision north of town, and they were comparing the the list of plants that the developer said they were going to put in around the retention ponds versus what was actually growing there. And a lot of what was growing was teasel. And in the front pond, the one most visible from the nearest roadway, you could see that somebody had come by and treated it. The leaves were yellowed and curled, and the plant was shrinking. So they probably had treated it with glyphosate or Roundup. That's the other thing, though, to be, when you just see these masses of this plant, you think, all right, well, you get a sprayer and you just go after it. But it's a chemical that really has to be applied judiciously, because you don't know what else is around there that maybe isn't apparent, because all you're seeing is the teasel, but there could be other smaller plants or seeds that would be negatively affected by a mass spraying. And you don't, anytime you apply a herbicide, you want to only use the minimal, the least amount that you can in order to achieve your objective. So, yeah.
Well, I know the forest preserve, I mean, of course they only have a staff of 11, but I know they do try and address it in the forest preserves themselves. So that could be some of the reason that some of the forest preserves do not have it. But it's, we have 23,000 acres, and as I said, there's only 11 of them, so it's a lot to take on. And of course, KDOT has the whole county to consider too. So it's just a daunting task.
Well, and you'd mentioned too the chervil and there's a lot of roadside weeds that they all have their season. Chervil's
Yes.
a little bit earlier.
Right.
In bloom, but you start looking at these things, and all of a sudden when you're looking strictly at these disturbed areas, it can get daunting and overwhelming. But the good news is that in the managed natural areas, I think it is something that can be controlled. And I kind of wonder, at the Calsag Canal, I don't know the jurisdictions there, how much is forest preserve, and who is in charge of some of these areas, and maybe it's something that a Friends of group or a Natural Areas volunteer group will get after at some point. Let's hope anyway, huh? All right. Well, you know what? Let's move along from teasel for now, and I'm gonna stop this share. Sit up straight, and let's take a look at some pictures from the last week. As I mentioned, having a praying mantis has put this I won't call it a burden, because I've had a lot of fun doing it, but I've been out and looking for insects a lot more than I look for bugs on a pretty regular basis anyway, but trying to find things that the little mantis can eat comfortably and that won't eat him or her has really proven to be a challenge. Now, the other night I was up at Tally Park, which is up on it's up in Valley View. It's actually upstream from the bicycle bridge, the old Aurora Elgin tracks that cross by John Dewar and Tecawitha Woods Forest Preserves. Tally is a little upstream from there, and it's a park on a floodplain. So if we're in a dry spell, it's a great place to go. If we've had a lot of rain, Tally is underwater. But I was also checking it out for the event we have coming up this Saturday, the Rusty Rodeo, which I'll be putting a plug in for before we're done tonight. And I was walking along the riverbank, overloaded. This is, talk about invasives. The majority of the stream bank plants growing at Tally Park are reed canary grass, which was fine for when I started looking for grasshoppers for the little mantis, but it is somewhat disturbing when you think of all the other wetland and wet-loving plants that might be growing there. All this down here in the lower right corner, that's all reed canary. I took this picture though because I thought, you know what, you cannot keep a good willow down. Here, this tree tipped over The top of it's dead, a lot of it's submerged, and look, it is still kicking, sending up fresh green shoot. I was Facebook chatting with a former employee of the St. Charles Park District. He works at a different district now, and he was on a little bit of a rant himself about things to not plant in your yard, and one of them was willows. He was, kind of down on willows, and I had to stick up for him and say, you know what, in the right spot, which is, along a waterway, willows are perfect. You probably don't want them in your yards because they are messy and they do spread and they break apart quite frequently and they do tip over like this. But there it is. It's still stabilizing the riverbank there, and it is still sending up new growth, even though the bigger part of the tree has passed on. So I walked a little bit farther, and here amongst the reed canary grass I saw the telltale signs of a spider web with a zipper in the middle. You might remember what that means. There's certain groups of spiders that you can identify not by having to look at the actual creature, but by the home that they've built. So this zipper tells us that we're looking at a member of the genus Argiope. But when we look, so this is, some people call the most common Argiope we have, Rancha, they call it the banana spider, or the black and yellow spider, the black and yellow garden spider, or the garden spider. It has lots of common names, but it's big, it's black, it's yellow, and it tends to hang out as an adult in the center of the web, right here by the zipper. But I was looking, and the web itself was in good shape, but there was no spider. And I thought, well, here we are. This was the end of July. Usually when those spiders reach their full adult size, it is end of August and into September. So we're a little bit early for grown-up Argiopes. But I was looking and looking, and what I ended up having to do was look behind this creation to a smaller web. And here the young Argiope was hanging out. Now, I don't know, now I want to go and find every Argiope web I can to see if this is what they do. But people have often commented, where do these spiders come from? Because I never see them until, all of a sudden here's this giant web with this giant spider. But in this case, this web was, I would guess, maybe a foot across, if even. And an adult Argiope will often spin a web much larger than that. This one might have even been more like 10 inches from side to side. And then in the little pocket behind where that obvious web is where the young spider was hanging out. So I thought that was kind of a cool discovery. And again, now that my eyes are open to that, I want to look for more and see what else I can learn about these spiders when they're in their less obvious developmental stage. So I walked a little farther and I saw some swamp milkweed, and this isn't a great picture of the flower. It's kind of progressed some. But looking at what was crawling on it, I knew it was milkweed because of these milkweed beetles. We hear so much about the monarchs and how we need to plant more milkweed so we can help the monarchs, but there are so many. There are dozens and dozens and dozens of other types of insects that are also dependent on milkweed. So we've got our milkweed beetles here, and then we've got this caterpillar that is often on milkweed, but not often seen just one at a time. We will sometimes see many. This is the milkweed tussock moth caterpillar. If you are a fan of the St. Charles East Saints, then this is your caterpillar because it's orange and black with a little bit of white thrown in. But the milkweed tussock moth, so unlike the monarch, which lays its eggs singly, the tussock moth will deposit a few dozen eggs at a time on a plant, and then you get a few dozen caterpillars like this, and they will mow down a lot of milkweed as they're feeding and growing. and then they leave the plant and pupate, and then we get more tussock moths. They're native. They're not considered harmful to milkweed in any way. There are certain birds that have a taste for fuzzy moths. I don't know, though now that I've said that, I'm not sure, since these guys feed on milkweed, I'm not sure how popular they are with birds. But suffice it to say, they are not considered a pest. Some people do get concerned if they've got like 2 milkweed plants in their yard and they're trying to help monarchs, and then the tussock moth moves in. But it's just a consequence of growing a native plant. It's going to, our human purpose, we might have, a singular purpose in mind, but nature doesn't work that way. There's always many, many layers. And tussock moths is just part of having milkweed. Now, I also saw some jewelweed, and you might remember a few weeks ago I showed you this picture. This is the yellow jewelweed, which is the more unusual form. This is, I think, pallida, Impatiens pallida. This is the orange jewelweed, much more common, and again, it likes damp areas. It often grows in companionship with our stinging nettles. In this case, however, it was growing alongside the reed canary grass, which was everywhere at Tally, in case I didn't mention that. Now this is, as we get into August, these flowers are going to, once they're pollinated, they're going to form a pod, and that's where this plant, both the orange and the yellow varieties, will form these pods, and that's where these plants get their other common name, the touch-me-nots, because those pods, they build up a lot of fluid pressure inside, and when you brush against them or tap on them, they spring open and they fling their seeds. If you do it with your hand, if you can like wrap your hand around those turgid pods and just give it a little tap, the pods will open up in your hand. You can catch the seeds. They actually are kind of tasty. They taste a little bit like pistachios. And don't take my advice if you're prone to food allergies or anything. Don't go, having a reaction on a touch-me-not seed. But if you like trying plants like that, give some jewelweed a whirl. It's kind of fun. So that'll be ripening as we get through towards the end of August and into September. I also went to Otter Creek Bend Wetland Park. This was on Sunday. This was to prepare again for our Rusty Rodeo. Otter Creek Bend Wetland Park will not be a site where we will be collecting rusty crayfish this Saturday, because this creek that 10-15 years ago was fabulous, diverse habitat. We had several different species of crayfish, as well as freshwater mussels, and even a cool little crustacean called a glass shrimp. All the development that has occurred north of Otter Creek Bend has really had an impact on the stream. There's been a lot of erosion. There's a lot of silt. Didn't find any crayfish habitat, but I did find some frog habitat. This is, let's zoom in here, take a look at this froggy right here. Anybody want to guess? We've got a fold going down either side of the back. It's a pretty decent sized frog. I did not put my lip balm in the soft, silty water.
This is that a green frog, Pam?
It is a green frog. Ding, 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 ding. Yeah, so green frogs and bullfrogs, a mature green frog and an immature bullfrog can be very, very similar, but the green frog, and this one is pretty well fed, those folds are somewhat stretched. And a thinner frog, they're more obvious, but the green frog has folds, one on either side of its back, going down towards the rump. And a bullfrog only has a fold that goes around the ear spot here behind the eye. So yes, we have a green frog. And then I went a little bit farther and through yet another mass of reed canary grass. I saw a little movement, and if we zoom in here, oh, I can't believe a piece of grass got in the way. We found another species that's got what we call dorsolateral folds, so two almost like pleats going down the back, these folds of skin. This is our northern leopard frog. Lots and lots and lots and lots of northern leopard frogs at Otter Creek Bend this year. It's a big year for them in the path. You know, a few weeks ago we were talking about the little toadlets that were swarming all over. These guys mature at a larger size than the toads, but there were just a ton of these leopard frogs bouncing across the path at Otter. But yeah, no crayfish because the habitat has really, really taken a nosedive there, at least in the sites that were accessible on foot. I also kind of think there's a lot of beaver activity up that way, and when beavers build dams, the silt, the stream isn't able to clean itself, so the silt backs up, and I kind of wonder if we're going to see over time a change there, if that stream is going to get wider and maybe develop into create a larger marshy area there. Some good news that we'll see have an effect in future years. The property just south of Otter Creek Bend, and we're talking, this is Crane Road, south of Silver Glen, but north of Bolcom. It's right across from the Prairie Cemetery and not too far from St. Pat's Church. The chunk of property just south of Otter Creek Bend is now owned by the Forest Preserve District. It's still in crops right now. It was wheat this year, which was kind of cool, probably because of the situation over in Ukraine and Russia. We don't see a lot of wheat around here. But now with what's going on over there, maybe we are going to see more. But the wheat was just taken in within the last couple of weeks. But the bigger management plan there is to let that land break the tiles in there and turn it into wetland too. So these frogs, future's looking pretty good for them in that chunk of town. So then. Now this started out as a rusty crayfish exploration, but it also turned into a bug hunt for the praying mantis Riverside Park. So the formal name for this is Riverside Buoy. This is the park over on it's the south, right on the border with Geneva on Route 25. It's right where Division Street hits Route 25, across the street from there. Riverside does have some rusty crayfish there in the water. So the Rusty Rodeo is an event that we are cooperatively holding along with the Forest Preserve District and Red Oak Nature Center, which is part of the Fox Valley Park District. If we look at this crayfish and we look back here in this part of the carapace in the middle here, that is one of the field marks, that rusty circle. It looks like somebody dipped their finger in paint and then picked the crayfish up. This is an invader. It's considered an injurious species here in Illinois. It's pretty aggressive towards other native species. And it doesn't have to be just native crayfish. It will fight when native fish try to eat it. When we feed them to our Blandings turtles, if we don't freeze them first, the rusty crayfish fight back, and the Blandings turtles don't want to eat them. They'd rather have kibbles that don't fight back. So anyway, we are now in the fourth year maybe of the Rusty Rodeo program, where we go out for 2 hours on a Saturday, and with help from the public, we see how many rusty crayfish we can catch. Last year in 2 hours, we caught 1,800 at Pearson Creek Park. We'll be doing that event again this year, this Saturday from 11 to 1. We're going to start at Primrose Farm Park, but then we're going to deploy teams to 3 different parks in St. Charles, to Fearson Creek Park again, and to Mount St. Mary's Park, and also down at Riverside. So anyway, I was doing some scouting this weekend. One more shameless plug. If anyone is interested in volunteering, shoot me an email afterwards and I can send you more details on that event this coming Saturday. But anyway, so there I am, Riverside Buoy. Here is our rusty crayfish. We just wanted to kind of get a sense. We're doing a pre-survey and then a post-survey, pre-event and post-event, to see if this collection effort is having any effects. So I got that part out of the way, and then I started walking around, and this is another plant that once your eye gets trained to see it, you start realizing how prevalent it is. This is purple loosestrife, another invader that actually was fairly well controlled going back, say, 15 years or so. There was a really, I thought, quite successful program where classrooms were raising, it was an example of biological control. Classrooms were raising the purple loosestrife beetle, and it's a risky thing when you import. This is a European species, and if you import its control species from its native land, you always have to worry that controlling species is then going to, once it eats its target, it's going to transfer to other species. Well, this purple loosestrife beetle did not. It only ate purple loosestrife, and it did a fabulous job of getting rid of this obnoxious invader. But then it kind of ate itself out of a job. It ate all the purple loosestrife, and then there was nothing more to eat, and the beetles, most of them did not survive. So, given enough time, seeds, this is a plant that loves to grow near water, and water transports its seeds. And so, over time, these plants have started to crop up again. And I actually had a couple of emails last week from a member of the Potawatomi Garden Club, because they've noticed it as they were doing some plant maintenance along the Bob Leonard Parkway. They were doing a cleanup over there, and they said that there's some purple loosestrife there. So I had checked a few years ago into getting purple loosestrife beetles for some St. Charles School District classrooms, and the cost at that time, because they weren't readily available, it was going to be something like $500 or $600 just for like a few dozen beetles. I'm going to check into it again, because it seems as though with the plant coming back, there's more interest in controlling it again. But let's just say there's a lot of purple loosestrife popping up in the wet areas there at Riverside. So then I started on my little bug hunt for the hungry mantis, and I went to that sign we saw, that redwood painted sign, and I saw there's all sorts of bee activity. And I'm not going to even pretend to know what kind of bees these are, but they were clearly going in and out. They've got some, they're probably provisioning nests in these crevices of this sign. And then I heard this of a much different and seemingly larger bee. And look who we have here. This is a wool carder bee, and they collect the fuzz from plants. I know I see them here in my yard. There is a native wool carder bee, but I think this is the European. I'm assuming it is, because they're the more common one. And it's kind of funny, Greg, you were talking about the teasel being used to tease the wool and make it into felt. The wool carder bee gets its name from carding the plant wool, the fuzzy surface of plants like mullein and lamb's ears, and they use that to create the nests that they then put eggs in and then provision for overwintering. So I was at first afraid that this was some sort of a predator that was going in after those other cavity nesting bees, but nope, it was just a wool carder bee. that was going in and out of the sign, using those crevices to make a home for its offspring as well. Apologize for the graphic nature, but I know so many of us are concerned about the status of our monarchs, and I really am trying to be hopeful and say that we had a cold, wet spring, and there were lots of storms, and they're just slower and getting down to business this year. And I was super happy, even though this was on ragweed. We are going to have some more baby monarchs, some little monarch caterpillars popping up at Riverside Buoy and the surrounding areas, wherever there's milkweed, because there's monarchs doing it. This beetle, every time I see one of these, I do a double take because they are just absolutely gorgeous. But then I did a triple take because this bug was not where I expected to see it. This is a dogbane beetle, dogbane leaf beetle. This is dogbane. And it has a milky sap, and this, so it's sometimes construed to be a milk monarch source, but Diana, I don't know if you're on tonight, but I found one monarch on a dogbane, and I always assumed that it was a host for monarchs. But it's not.
Supposedly not.
Yeah, well, and I think you're right, because the monarch I saw was going into its J, so it probably left its milkweed and then formed its chrysalis.
Right. I actually just wrote a comment that I know some of the monarch enthusiasts, when they're worried about a shortage of milkweed, they'll transfer the tussock moths to dogbane, because the tussock moths can survive on dogbane, but monarchs cannot.
Interesting. Well, I saw one tussock moth on dogbane up at Tally, and I thought maybe it had done what the monarch had done and just walked over there to go pupate, but so maybe it was going to feed there.
Yeah, I've heard they will feed on dogbane safely.
Okay. Cool.
But not monarchs.
Oh, you're right. Yeah. Well, these little dogbane beetles, dogbane leaf beetles, they look like liquid copper. They just have such a sheen to them. I think it has something to do with the way moisture is held underneath those wing covers there, but just absolutely gorgeous. Of course, too big for a praying mantis to eat, and I didn't want to catch it anyway. It was just too pretty. But then I saw this interesting bug. No idea what it was. It was on Bee Balm, Monarda. And so I did a little Google image search thing and came up with, this group. There's like a bunch of similar species, but it's a type of plant bug. And what struck me about this insect, I thought it might be a predator, but I don't believe it is. I think it feeds on plant fluids. But look at these antennae. If we zoom in here, they're described, these thickened antennae are actually flattened hairs. So I don't know what role that plays. I wasn't able to find a whole lot about this large group of insects that feeds on plant fluids, but it was kind of cool. And just, the more you look, the more you learn. This is a rant. So that ended my little bug seeking adventure. I am still in the market for easy to catch bugs. I've been mostly, and it looks like, actually looking over here on the side of Casa Otto, we've got a lot of caddisflies that are massing underneath the deck light out here. It is a little breezy, which isn't good for bugs, but it is still quite warm and quite humid, and muggy weather is buggy weather. So I think the mantis will be having caddis for dinner tonight. All right, back on track. Brief rant, and then we'll move on to our final story. Wave action along the Fox River. When we were catching rusty crayfish at Pearson Creek Park the other day, there's a lot of boat traffic. There is a no wake zone as you get closer to Potawatomi Park, and Boy Scout Island, but as you go upstream from there, it's wide open throttles, and this is super fun, and I don't want to take people's fun away. I don't want to be that kind of nature nerd that, takes the fun out of everything, but jet skis and speedboats create wakes that then lap up against the shore. Now, across the way here, so this is, I'm standing in the water at Fearson Creek Park, and I'm looking east. And there's all kinds, if you go up the Fox River, you'll see all kinds of different ways people have tried to stabilize their shoreline. This is rocks. We've got similar arrangements over at the golf course, which is just downstream from here. But yeah, wave action really takes its toll. If there's not something there, if there's not the roots of, say, silver maples and willows, if an area has been, say, mowed to the edge and then is subject to repeated waves from boat traffic like this, a lot of shoreline gets washed away that way. So again, I'm not going to be that girl and complain anymore. It's just something that I'm very aware of when I'm standing there, and I hear that lapping wave action, and you can almost see the little particles of sand and soil being washed away and taken into the river channel. All right. Kind of a cool thing, a few weeks ago I'd mentioned there's the cell tower over in West Chicago off of, I think it's Atlantic Drive. It's actually just west of where the Menards and the Volkswagen dealer is at Route 59 and Route 64. There's a cell tower there that has osprey on it. And since that time, new little distracted driving hobby that I have is looking up at cell towers to see if anything's nesting there. So I was driving with some friends the other day and looked up, and lo and behold, there is a nest and there are osprey. This is up in unincorporated, I don't know if it's Elgin or Pingree Grove, but this is Route 72, a little bit east of Route 47. If we zoom in, we can see the birds very blurrily circling the nest. Here's one flying by here, and here's two here. Now if we zoom in here, and I'll apologize because this is just my cell phone, but the bend in the wings here, and then I did, as I was driving, get a better glimpse of the white underside and the brown kind of robber mask by the eyes that the osprey has. So this is something that the Illinois Department of Natural Resources is actively tracking. If you want to join me in this distracted driving hobby, they encourage it because they're trying to get a handle on just how many of these birds, which are still considered to be, I don't know if they're endangered anymore, they might just be threatened in Illinois, but it's largely because they don't have a good handle on how many of these birds there are nesting on cell towers. So keep your eyes open. Osprey do migrate, so they'll be leaving here as the weather starts to get colder, but now's the time when their young are fledging, and it's kind of fun to check out these cell towers, as long as you do it safely. Osprey on cell towers. Supposedly they use tall, it's called mast lighting, tall mast lighting, like you see on interstates and stuff. Anything that's going to give them a nice 360 view of their surroundings is something that osprey look for. So probably so they can keep their eye out for eagles that like to steal their food. Anyway, one more quick little story. It was time to feed the snakes at Hickory Knolls, and it's always an adventure. Here's Billy having a snack. Billy actually had several snacks. Check out Big Bill's big tummy there. He ate very well this week. This picture just cracked me up. This is Paul the ball python, and well, the pose cracked me up. I had to take a picture of it. He's feeding, we feed all of our snakes there. It's pre-killed frozen prey that we thaw out for them. And Paul was just, he's a classic, I play with my food first kind of snake. And it looked like he was whispering sweet nothings to this rat before he swallowed it. And he stayed like this forever. He did end up eating 3 rats, but it took him, gosh, close to 45 minutes to get his dinner down the other night, because he was just in a playful and kind of funny mood. A good old Paul the Ball. So here we have I really thought I was going to be at Hickory Knolls all night. If you look in the background here, you can see there's items set up. This was last Friday night. Wedding people were coming in at 8 a.m. Saturday to finish their setup and to get married. So I was trying to get the snakes fed the night before. And I had taken Randy, the black rat snake, out, and I was feeding him there on the rug. Went to check on Paul, took the cute picture of Paul playing with his rats, and I came back and Randy was gone. Now, there's a lot of decor that was set up in the Nature Center. This was, I think, going to be kind of a vintage display. There were the tall boy, high boy, tall boys are beers, right? Whatever those tall tables are, cocktail tables, those were set up throughout the lobby. Lots of tablecloths sitting around. Basically, Randy could be anywhere. And this is getting on to close to 10 o'clock on Friday night, and I thought, doggone it, I've got about 10 hours to find this snake or else. By the way, Randy is 7 feet long, and so on the one hand shouldn't be too hard to find, but on the other hand he can hide himself very well. I finally found him behind the refrigerator, and the good news is that the refrigerator, after I rocked it a few times, it was a little bit stuck to the floor, but I was able to slide it out and get Randy out of his little hiding place there behind the refrigerator. He took a liking to the wedding drinks, which you'll note are all shrink wrapped, so he wasn't contaminating anything. But after that, I thought, boy, he only ate 1 rat. And he was eating 3 or 4, and I thought, all right, this is a guy who needs some enrichment. So I took him out, and he had a good hour or so to climb around. And this is a exhibit that's in development. From my understanding, it's going to be an example of how humans build houses, and then the companion display is going to be examples of different wildlife houses, how animals build houses. Again, it's a work in progress, and I'm not involved in this project, but it makes a dandy snake climbing structure. So Randy got a nice little romp there. I thought he might be interested in the food that he'd left behind, but as it turns out, he just wanted to play too. So I was able to wrap up the snake feeding assignment that I had by about 11 o'clock Friday night. No thanks to this guy. But there's another cute picture I thought you guys might enjoy. That is, if you like snakes. And with that, let's stop the share. See, we're after 9 o'clock already. Got a couple of chats here to get to, and then I wanted to check and see if the beetles have woken up yet. Let's go to the top here. I wonder how teasel behaves in a natural habitat. Google search found this USDA field guide on how to manage it in the Southwest. Maybe some tips apply here. Of course, money and manpower are always issues. Well said, Jerry. That is always at the forefront. I was talking with our restoration staff, about how the money is, how funds are allocated, and it just seems like there's so much work to be done. And because our natural areas, they are well funded, but they don't in fact, we're working on a way to change the view of natural areas in a Parks and Rec setting. Recreation does bring in revenue. People pay so that their kids can learn how to play soccer and tennis and learn how to swim and learn how to dance and learn how to golf and all these things. All those are revenue generating things. Natural areas, they're there for passive recreation, and we don't have a toll booth set up. We don't charge people to walk out there. So yeah, money is always going to be an issue. But yeah, I'll check that out, Jerry. Thanks for looking that up.
No problem.
And yes, goldfinches like the seeds of teasel. Yeah, goldfinches, yeah, they like those thistles. Yeah, you know what? If teasel supports the digestive system, maybe Meredith, we set up a health food store that sells teasel extract or something. I know some monarch enthusiasts who have a shortage of common milkweed that will move. Okay, we talked about that. Are the beavers still active at Otter Creek? Never mind. Yeah, yeah, and you can, if you are so inclined to go, it's about a mile loop walk that you can do at Otter Creek Bend Wetland Park. As you're going, if you walk the loop clockwise, you'll come to first one boardwalk and then a second boardwalk. That second boardwalk forms a Y, and from that Y, that intersection there, you can see a beaver canal that they've dug. Beavers will dig away from a stream. If they find a source of, say, willow or some other food plant, they'll dig a canal through the soil, and then the water from whatever stream they're living by will fill that canal in, and then they can float their food and their construction materials down the canal. It's way easier than having to drag it. So there's a nice beaver canal that's formed at Otter too. For some reason, I have never had the good luck to find monarch caterpillars on milkweed in my neighborhood. I did find a cluster of oleander aphids on a plant this week, though, along with milkweed. But yeah, you know what, Jerry? I had the same thing. And by the way, I don't have milkweed this year. Well, I did plant this year some world milkweed, but I don't know. It's kind of gotten engulfed by other things. I don't know how well it's doing. But the common milkweed that I had succumbed to a pathogen. I don't remember the name of, I think it's a bacteria, but it's called milkweed yellows. We did talk about it. I don't remember if it was last summer or 2 summers ago. But they, it causes the milkweed leaves to narrow and lose their chlorophyll, and they look kind of wrinkly. And the only way to get rid of it is to dig up the plant, the roots, and don't compost it, don't keep it, because that pathogen will perpetuate in the soil. You just have to get rid of all of it. So yeah, I don't have any milkweed anymore, any common milkweed anymore. But for years, Jerry, I would look and I'd be so hopeful for monarch caterpillars, and I would have the earwigs like we talked about last week, spiders, long-legged flies, milkweed beetles, milkweed bugs, all these other things. But then that was then one year. Then I did find a couple of eggs, and I brought them in. And
I was just going to say that, Pam. It's much much easier to find eggs than it is to find caterpillars.
I think.
I mean, sometimes you can find. I often will find the little hole that the real teensy weensy ones make, because it's a special pattern. It's kind of not a circle, but it's like a circle.
Yeah.
Those I can find, but other than that, I mean, the eggs are much easier to find than the caterpillars.
Yeah. So keep looking, Jerry, and what Diana's describing. Yeah, it's almost like
it's an uneven circle. If I find one, I'll take a photo. You can show it next week.
That'd be great, because and I read that the caterpillar does that because it helps them, because a tiny just hatched monarch caterpillar, it's in a little bit of peril there. They're so tiny, and they're chewing on a leaf that has this latex like sap to it, this milky sap. They can get stuck in it, but they have to chew it a certain way so that it doesn't.
Right. They stay away from the veins.
Yeah.
Because they don't want they
don't
can't
wanna
have an
engulf
excess
it.
of the sap.
Yeah.
And also they also eat their eggshell. So, and then they eat a little tiny round circle, and from the top of the plant sometimes you can see that.
Yes.
So that I often will find that, but the larger caterpillars are really difficult to find.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll keep my eye out for the holes and the caterpillars. And then I just found out the oleander aphids are invasive. So I'm like, wah, wah, wah.
Well, and one more thing, thought on the milkweed. Last fall, I was walking with a group down in Aurora, and it was the east side. We were near Montgomery, on the east side of the Fox River, and there was a big stand of world milkweed, and that's the world, WHORLED, world milkweed, and it's got a narrow leaf. My gosh, it was these plants. I must have seen half a dozen monarch caterpillars, good sized ones, without really even trying. And it was because there's no place to hide because they're bigger than the leaves are very narrow, and they must be somewhat. It almost seemed like the monarch females preferred that plant for laying eggs because there was common milkweed nearby that I didn't see caterpillars on. But it was that particular kind of milkweed makes it really easy to find the little cats or the big cats because they stick out. There's no big leaf. It's all narrow leaves that they were feeding on.
You just have common in the neighborhood.
Well, let's change that.
Yes. I'll get
So
some.
I can get you some pods. I owe you some seeds.
No, you don't.
Well, let's, you know what, real quick here, folks, we're way past time, but I see that we've got some activity here in the box of beetles. So what I've got here is one of those plastic critter keepers, and there's about 4 or 5 inches of decomposing wood chips, and which I'm hoping is a suitable substrate because I really want to see if I can get stag beetle eggs and then raise stag beetle grubs. It's on my bucket list. But here's one of the females who's come out now that it's dark out, and I'm gonna hold it up. Look at those small. I'm gonna hold up the expired male here as a comparison. So here's his large mandibles, and she's doing a little dance. You can see she's got mandibles, but they're much smaller. They can still give a good pinch. In fact, this one, I've had females draw blood. The males, it pricks, it hurts, but I haven't actually gotten any chunks of skin pulled off by a male, but these females, those are pretty sharp jaws. But anyway, she's out again, so I'm hopeful. This weekend I'm going to go through the substrate, and I'm going to see the eggs they're small and round and orange is what I'm going to be looking for. I've been trying to keep it mice. I've actually been keeping them out here on the deck because of this humidity. Humidity is such a killer, or lack of humidity is such a killer for insects indoors that I've been keeping as much as I can. I bring them in when it's raining, but I've been keeping the beetles and the mantis out here on the deck. Make sure I don't knock it off the railing. Not sure where the mantis is back up on the roof of his enclosure. And yeah, there's caddis flies everywhere. I actually had a couple go down my shirt. So it might be time to call it a night because I gotta evict some bugs here. So folks, very, very much, so much appreciate you spending extra time with us. My goodness, this is probably the world's longest, longest good-natured hour on record. But appreciate your time tonight. If you're interested in Rusty Rodeo, shoot me an email. I'll shoot you details on that. Thanks again. We'll see you again next week. Thanks.
Thank you. Good night.
Thanks, Pam.
Pam.
Good night.
Pam.
Night, Pam.
Thank you, Pam.
Thank you. Take care.